I'd like to also announce that we have on next Saturday, August 2nd, from 7 to 9, is the 21st annual Hiroshima Nagasaki Remembrance Peace Lantern Ceremony over at Lovers Point, Pacific Road. So at 7 o'clock, lantern making and taiko drumming. 7:45 will be music and messages of hope and peace. And at 8:15, they're launching of Peace Lantern. So come on by to Lovers Point next Saturday from 7 to 9 p.m. With that, we have Stephen Rebuck coming in, and actually one of our books, get some of our books here in the Monterey Public Library, so if you want to check them out over there too.
Well, good morning, folks. I'm so glad you're here, and I appreciate the nice opportunity. There's one thing I want to mention that's been left out the last 2 days. Abalone is 20% protein and 2% fat, so it's a very healthy food. Many of my commercial diving associates live well into their 90s, and they explain a few things. Great source of protein. I wanted to preface my talk. My talk's going to be about Monterey Bay, and I wanted to start off talking about my friend Tim Thomas. I've known Tim several years, and I approached him a couple of years ago about doing a book on abalone diving, and he was a little reluctant at first. Took me a little while to communicate with him, but he finally took the bait and produced a really nice book. I inherited a really nice collection of photographs from a fellow named Glenn Bickford. He was from the Midwest, came to California in the 30s, started diving abalone in the late 30s, and he was an avid photographer. Took a lot of beautiful photographs, many of which are in our book. Also through Tim, I got to meet the great Sandy Lydon, who was here yesterday, a real favorite of mine. I told him when I met him, I said, I've got a collection of your books that I bought in a used bookstore years before I met him. So, very prolific author and a wonderful man. I want to talk a little bit about diving. This conference has really been wonderful. I learned so much, and I got to see a number of friends. Brian Tussaud, for example, I've known, communicated with him for years, but never actually met him. So we finally met. And then many other people that are here the last couple of days have made some good friends. Last night I came to the White Abalone discussion, and I learned that they had lost their funding. Well, over the years I've done fundraising for Sea Grant and been successful. I coached wrestling for 25 years. A couple of years ago we needed money, so we had an all-you-could-eat Dungeness crab dinner at the Madonna Inn in San Luis Obispo. We grossed $40,000 in one night. That's something that can be done, especially with a wonderful product like seafood and even cultured abalone. I found an article a couple of days ago that there was an interview with me from 1990, and the first sentence in it was another commercial friend of mine. That he said, quote, "We used to be the good guys. Not so much anymore." And I couldn't agree. That was 30 years ago, and yet it's even gotten worse. I used to work with the Department of Fish and Game biologists. We would have meetings and sit in our office for hours and talk about different details of abalone, and just wonderful camaraderie. I had great friendships with these men. I got to know their families and visited their homes. And that ended 30 years ago. I was on the Seattle recovery team as their abalone technical consultant for 11 years. That was 20 years ago. That's over. These days, the commercial fishery are the bad guys. We're blamed for virtually everything that went bad with abalone. And it's not supported by the literature, it's not supported by the landing statistics. Were there problems? Absolutely. But I look at the commercial men. I started diving when I was 9 years old in 1956. I started fishing abalone when I was about 12 at Cayucas. I fished there right up until the closure in 1997. I fed my family. I'd always go up there and get my 2 legal abalone right to the end. Can't do that anymore. So it was a wonderful thing. I'd love to see it again. When I came to the program last night, I told the White Abalone folks that they've lost their funding. I told them about our fundraising efforts and offered to help them. I had these printed up a couple of years ago. This is a 12-inch abalone, if you've ever seen anything that large. The largest known specimen is even larger than this. And what I'm going to do is offer this. I'm going to put it on the table back here. If anybody would like to purchase this for a minimum $200 price, I'll donate that money to the White Abalone Project. And if I could do more, I'll do that as well. The only thing I'd ask from them and the academic community and the government community is please lighten up on the commercial men. We have a lot to offer. I have associates that have 20,000 hours underwater. I have one that has 40,000 hours underwater. That's 4.5 years of life he spent underwater. Is he invited to programs to speak? No. I'm pretty much ostracized from the debate anymore too. The Department of Fish and Wildlife now relegates us to our category as other. They don't even have the courtesy or respect to put commercial divers on their program. So please, is anybody from the Department of Fish and Wildlife? How about the Fish and Game Commission? No? Well, that makes me very sad. In our book, I have a chapter about abalone research. I was very good friends with Keith Cox, Fish Bulletin 118 from 1962, which I think is probably one of the better publications on abalone by a government agency. I would encourage all of you, if you're interested, to find it and read it. But, you know, I had these great relationships, and I really miss them. So I think with that, we'll start the slideshow. For you, those of you that don't know Morro Bay, this is a beautiful shot, overhead shot of Morro Rock. You can see that in this photo there's no causeway. That was built in the 30s, and this is when Morro Rock was an island. Morro Bay is about 100 miles south of here on Highway 1. This is a similar picture of Morro Rock. Now the face of this rock is different now because they blew it off with dynamite and used that rock for the jetties and breakwaters around Morro Bay. But that's what the rock looked like originally when it was an island. Now for the Japanese fishermen, this is from 1911 at Cayucas. These are men unloading their abalones at the beach of Cayucas. So they certainly had a presence down there. There's still a lot of Japanese families in that area down there. They have beautiful farms and grow strawberries and artichokes and such. Okay, next. 1928, an enterprising family called the Pierce family, the Pierce brothers, started fishing abalone. This picture, I think, is at Cayucas around 1928. It's Bill Pierce, dressed in, ready to get in the water. He's got his bag. You can see a compressor in the background there. He's actually walking into the surf over the reef structure into the water to pick his abalones. These are men of steel. They're just quite amazing. Here next. This was one of the brothers, Wimpy Pierce. They all had wonderful nicknames. And but this is Wimpy's boat. It's a Japanese boat. 1940 is the date on it. But this is when see, the first year they didn't have a boat, they were diving off the beach. Next year they got reality and bought a boat. This man here was my oldest and dearest friend. I met him when he was 17 and I was 7 down in San Diego. I was born on Santa Catalina Island in 1947. The day I was born, my dad went commercial abalone diving, and so when he arrived at the hospital, I tell people the first aromas was mom, then dad, And on the way in, he stopped at San Clemente and bow hunted a goat, and then abalone. So those are the first 4 aromas of my life. Laddie was really a special guy. He's in his early 20s here. I kind of think of him as our version of Roy Hattori. If you look at the various populations, from the Native Americans to the Chinese and then the Japanese, white guys were the last ones to the party. But Laddie, he was from New York. His uncle Jimmy was a commercial diver in San Diego, and after Santa Catalina, we moved to San Diego area in 1951, and then to Morro Bay in 55. Laddie followed us up there in 1957. But in this picture here, he's probably about 21, so he's similar to Roy Hattori in that regard. But when the sea otter took out the abalone at Morro Bay in the early 60s, Laddie was one of the young guys, and there was a few others. They all moved south back to Santa Barbara area. And in Summerland, they were building the offshore oil rigs down there, and they needed divers. And so some of these divers started working with the oil companies. Laddie founded a company called Caldive initially, and then his next company was called Oceaneering, and then Oceaneering International. The last couple of years, Oceaneering has been working with NASA on the spacesuits and helmets for the trip to Mars. So this is my point with the academics and the government people. We have a lot to offer. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of experience, and we have a lot of good ideas. I got to meet Dr. Kathy Sullivan a few years ago. Sylvia Earle introduced me to her. She was the first U.S. woman to walk in space. And she was in training in Santa Barbara. We were all working out of the same office at the time. And she was being trained by Sylvia's husband, Graham Hawkes, in submersibles and preparing for her spacewalk. So I've encountered other astronauts along the way. We have such a wonderful history, and all this evolved out of abalone diving. Okay, for those of you who don't know heavy gear, this is a good example of heavy gear diving. It's as cumbersome as it is and how it looks. The diving equipment is actually very warm. You wear wool underwear under it, and it's very safe and very comfortable. In modern times, yesterday they were showing the images of Roy Hattori, and they showed his hose and they showed a safety line that was attached. Well, a gentleman named Al Hansen back in the 40s started installing stainless steel cable inside the air hose as a safety line. The worst thing that can happen to a diver is being wrapped or cut off, or his hose is cut by a propeller or some other object. And without a safety line or some other way to get back to the surface, you're pretty much doomed. Abalone Bill Pierce, who was shown in that first picture on the beach, he died that way. He was wrapped, his hose was wrapped under the boat, and he couldn't swim, and nobody on the boat could swim, and he drowned. So things like that did happen. This is another image of heavy gear and what's called a Barney bag, that net bag. Nobody knows where that name came from, but they're typically called Barney bags. This is another boat with quite a nice load on it. You see the ladder on the left side, on the port side. It's used by the diver to enter and exit the water. Okay, these are boxes that were used by Frank Brebs, who was an abalone diver processor at Morro Bay, and he invented these wax boxes, which I have several up here on the stage that you can look at. They came in 5-pound units, and it really helped market the abalone. I think that's the last of our slides. I wanted to point out also some of these books up here that this one, for example, was a book by Bob Kirby, who's another commercial abalone diver. Hard hat divers wear dresses. I think it's available still through the Historical Diving Society website. But Bob is a very dear friend. He's one of the guys I met back when I was a child. Brian cited this book, which is, if you like to look at it, it's really a terrific book. Buzz Owen was just a wonderful friend, and another one that was a commercial abalone diver originally. The next one there is Diving the Devil's Crown. That one's about the Farallon Islands. It's a self-published book, but it's really good for anybody that's interested in the Farallons. Place like some parts of the Channel Islands we refer to as Shark Park. There's really big ones out there. Next book is by Scrap Lundy. Scrap was a Special Forces diver and then a commercial abalone diver. Very good book on the history of abalone diving. Next one is the book by Keith Cox, Fish Bulletin 118, one of my personal favorites. Next is one by Torrance Parker, another commercial diver. This one does have a chapter in it about diving abalone, but it's mostly about diving technology in the United States. But Torrance was a commercial diver back in the 30s and 40s. So anyhow, it was a wonderful history. It was a wonderful life, working on the water. I was learning heavy gear diving as a teenager. I never really got to participate in that part of the fishery because otters came along. And as businessmen, we have to be successful. We have to go out and find our product, or we have to build things, or we have to earn that money. If we're not successful, there's the highway, you're fired. Academics and government, I know they have their own financial problems, but they're living off of grants and things like government largesse. And the problem is that, for me, I'll use Dan Miller as an example. He was a fish and game biologist, a good friend. He wrote a paper back in the 70s about marine protected areas, and he cited Point Lobos. And what he produced was that to have a marine protected area and have it successful, you needed three components. You needed clean water, you needed control on human use, and you needed control on marine mammals. Well, I did a little assessment a couple of weeks ago on the marine protected areas between here and Southern California, dozens of them. Some kind of work, a lot of them don't work. The ones between here and, say, Point Conception, they don't work very well because there's no control on the marine mammals, meaning sea otters, who at Cayucas, where I started fishing when I was a teenager, when I go there now and survey on low tides, I don't even find broken shells. I don't find even shell debris anymore. You're gone. Now there's some pockets, there are some areas that will have some protected abalone, and others not. It's not completely across the board, but I can't dive anymore, and I haven't surveyed the coast to really see what's going on. But between here and Gaviota now, there's not much. There are some pockets, but one spot I've gone to, Cayucas, for the last 60 years. Last time I was there, I found about 6 purple urchins down in holes. They grind holes into the rock. I didn't even see starfish. I didn't see crabs. Mussels? No. You go down here, Doc Ricketts, I think, would be shocked if he saw what happened here. I don't even see mussels or barnacles or anything on the piers anymore. Otters they're very prolific in their consumption of seafood. The first one I ever saw was 1957. I was probably 9 or 10 years old. And the diver, we didn't know what they were. We saw them swim by the boat. It was like, what's that thing? Well, you go down to the bottom and you find these eviscerated abalone, meaning that they take a rock, they break a hole in the shell, they eat the guts, and they leave the meat to die. And we were finding these abalone, the meat was still in the shell, but they were dying. And it was pretty shocking initially, and then that became the pattern all the way down the coast. So the department, unfortunately, these days is blaming everything bad on Abalone on the commercial divers and omitting their own scientific literature. And I would really appreciate it if the academic community and the government community would please lighten up and invite us back. We have a lot to offer, but it's pretty hard to get an invitation anymore. So I think with that, if there's questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Did you dive the Fairlawns?
I never wanted to.
Repeat the question.
Did I ever personally dive the Fairlawns? No, never did that. It's a pretty rugged place to be. And there was about 20 divers that worked out there over the years, in the past years. And they tended to carry Glocks. They had a holster sewn into their wetsuit right here. And they carried Glocks. And one of the divers had been a Vietnam-era tunnel rat, and he was a gunsmith. So he had modified the weapon so that it shoot underwater. His warning was, make sure your head is above the surface when you pull the trigger.
I work in security, and for decades now, there's been an enormous amount of tension between government, between academics, between commercial. And I just heard exactly the same pattern that I've been living with for 30 years, just in a different space. And I keep thinking of where are the common grounds? And I keep finding people who profit from dividing people against each other. And that's, from my personal experience, it's that there are individuals who profit personally, politically, from keeping groups that should be collaborating from doing so. And I'm just curious if that was something that you saw in your space as well.
Well, I saw it last week that the Fish and Game Commission had their Marine Subcommittee meeting, and they're working on a Red Abalone restoration plan, they're calling it now. And they had a category of individuals that were to be contacted. They had the NGOs and they had various other types. The commercial men weren't even included. We kind of fit into the category called other. That's so disrespectful. I mean, the role of a commercial fisherman is to feed people. Like I said, we used to be the good guys. Now we got the black hats, and it's not a fair arrangement. It's not, I was talking to the young man that was here last night from Sea Grant. Well, besides working just for Sea Grant, he's a cattle rancher. So he understands agriculture. And he said, yeah, I got the same problems with cattle. You know, people don't seem to know where their food comes from. And I was in the Army for 6 years. I had my training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. They taught us how to eat bugs. Okay, so not really appetizing, but they're high protein. You can survive on them. So I guess the answer is let them eat bugs.
Morro Bay was once hailed as the abalone capital of the world. In the 1930s, a handful of local men started the Morro Bay abalone industry, diving down to find abundant abalone covering the underwater reefs. The Central Coast was a rich area for mainly red abalone, the largest of about 100 abalone species worldwide. In its natural state, most red abalone are well camouflaged with marine growth, adhere to rocks, and eat mostly kelp. From the early 1900s to 1962, according to the State Fish and Game Department, over 110 million pounds of abalone were landed in Morro Bay. That's about 2 million pounds per year. The first abalone fishermen were the Native Americans. Coastal Indians shore-picked and ate abalone and used the beautiful iridescent shells for fish hooks, jewelry, and ceremonial objects. In the mid-1800s, Chinese immigrants flooded into California for the gold rush. In Chinese culture, abalone was highly prized, highly desired, and highly regulated. Peasants were banned from harvesting it. So the Chinese, very familiar with this Asian delicacy, were astounded and delighted to find the California shoreline carpeted with abalone, free for the picking. In 1853, a leading San Francisco newspaper described this Chinese abalone rush. Hundreds of struggling bands of Chinese had recently taken Monterey by storm, setting up beach camps to harvest, dry, pack, and ship California abalone off to Asian markets. Locally, on June 24, 1876, a front-page San Luis Obispo Tribune article noted that a Chinese junk was prospecting the waters off the Central Coast for abalone. Mr. Spooner, the wharfiger at Morro Bay, took note of the 10-man, 20-ton vessel painted all black. The Chinese prospered as rock pickers for 40 years, until the 1880s, when Congress excluded Chinese immigration to the U.S., and a 1900 ban on commercial shallow water abalone fishing put them out of business. Soon after, the Japanese started immigrating to the U.S. Undaunted by these new regulations, Japanese fishermen began diving for abalone growing in deeper water below the shorelines, at first free diving. These two Japanese free divers, shown around 1897, may be the first two commercial abalone divers in California. Their traditional divers' clothing was soon replaced by helmets and suits, better suited for the much colder California waters. Hard hat diving revolutionized the commercial abalone industry. The first abalone harvests were shipped to Japan until 1913. That's when exporting the shellfish became illegal. Soon after, though, fried abalone steaks were a big hit at the 1915 World's Fair in San Francisco, and the popularity of abalone boomed in the U.S. Until the late 1930s, Japanese divers filled the U.S. demand for abalone steaks. From the 1890s through the 1930s, Japanese from Monterey-based Point Lobos Canning Company were harvesting abalone from boats off our central coast, many operating out of Port San Luis. These Monterey-based Japanese divers were very important because they sparked the imagination of Morro Bay men, who followed in their footsteps and started abalone diving too. By 1905, Point Lobos Canning Company was drying abalone locally harvested by Japanese boats on racks on the beach north of the Cayucas Pier. The big white building on the end of Cayucas Pier that you see here was actually built in 1903 for a short-lived abalone processing operation. Japanese hardhat diving died out early in World War II when the U.S. government deported Japanese abalone divers, and discrimination forced American divers of Japanese ancestry into internment camps. From the Great Depression of the 1930s onward through the mid-1970s, when there was little industry in Morro Bay, the abalone industry gave many residents a way to earn a decent living and be their own bosses. Bill Pierce was the founder of the Morro Bay-based abalone industry, one of the first Euro-Americans to follow in the footsteps of the Japanese abalone divers. Bill Pierce was the oldest of 10 children. His remarkable California frontier-style family, his father was German and his mother was a Salinan Indian, survived by living off the land. Around 1922, Bill Pierce wandered into Morro Bay. To survive, he and a young crew that included his many younger brothers and cousins started plucking abalone from the shoreline at low tide. The Pierce crew also gazed out at the Japanese offshore in their boats, deep sea diving for abalone in heavy diving gear. Bill Pierce saw an opportunity and decided to learn from the Japanese. He laid claim to some of the abundant bounty just offshore. In 1928, Bill Pierce buys heavy diving gear. This truly amazing 1928 photo shows Pierce after a successful abalone dive, for which he walked into the water from the beach. His metal helmet and breastplate, heavy rubberized canvas suit, and lead-soled shoes weighed at least 150 pounds. Bill's brother Les Pierce is holding one of a couple bags full of abalone called Barney or goodie bags. Each could hold about 5 dozen abalone. His brother Dutch Pierce is holding Bill's helmet, and another man, T-Bone, is manning the hand-powered air pump. According to Bill Pierce's sister-in-law, Vera Pierce, the Japanese who started the abalone business were actually more interested in the beautiful shells. She says, by 1930, Bill had bought a boat and opened up Pierce Brothers Abalone Shop in Morro Bay. This is the Pierce Gang Processing Shop, the first in Morro Bay. The sign above the Pierce shop says, A. Palladini Abalone Packers, San Francisco. That was a large seafood company the Pierce brothers sold all their catch to. In the 1930s, the only place to unload abalone in Morro Bay was Stocking Pier. located in the Back Bay where Bayshore Village condos are today. These rare, amazing old images show the Stocking Pier in 1948 with the historically significant tugboat, the Alma, docked at the pier and the hillside covered with abalone shells. These abalone shells blanketing the Bayshore's bluff top, shown in 1938, are from the Pierce Brothers processing shop. Irvin Pete Stocking placed each shell upside down to stabilize the bluff. Today, you can walk down and see two old weathered wood pilings sticking up from the shoreline, the last remnants of the Stocking Pier. The nearby Pierce Abalone Processing Building at 580 Monterey Street is gone today. But the Monterey Bay Maritime Museum on the Embarcadero has pieces of this shop, including the tin roof, which now graces the roof of the Monterey Bay Maritime Museum information kiosk. The first underwater diving gear included a heavy canvas and rubber dress, a brass breast and shoulder plate, a 15-pound weight belt, shoes with lead soles weighing 20 pounds each, and a heavy sealed helmet. An onboard hose sent air southward, and the diver walked like a spaceman, filling sacks with abalone that were pried off the rocks with a 2-foot bar. The abalone dive boat crew usually included 3 or 4 men, a diver, the boat operator, a line tender, and maybe a deckhand. The line tender handled the air hose and the lifeline. That hose was about 130 feet long. The tender's main job was to minimize the chances of the air hose getting wrapped up in the propeller and cutting off the air supply. Abalone diving could be dangerous. In 1945, Bill Pierce drowned in a tragic diving accident off of Ragged Point.
He had a green crew. They got his hose caught in the prop, and they didn't know what to do. And before he could, get out of there, well, he run out of air and he died there.
Before Bill Pierce's terrible accident, during the early 1930s through World War II, Bill and the Pierce brothers taught other compadres their trade. This included 3 Revilla brothers and 6 Montgomery brothers, who had all moved to Morro Bay from Texas. Another Pierce protege was 25-year-old Glenn Bickford, a farm boy who came out west from Iowa. Iowans had never heard of an abalone. In a letter home, which was printed in his hometown Iowa newspaper in 1936, Bickford told a fascinating story about learning to dive.
Dear folks, I guess it's about time I got around to writing you a letter. I don't know if I told you I am working for a different diver. Diving is a terrific strain on a man, and only the strongest and toughest can stand it. A good diver must have the endurance of a horse and a wonderful constitution.
According to Bickford, a diving dress is about as cumbersome a costume as anyone will ever hope to wear. He says his very first dive lasted only a few minutes.
It's a funny sensation being under the water for the first time. I put my nose against the neckpiece in blue, but my ears wouldn't pop. They felt as though there was a sharp pencil against each eardrum with a strong man pushing on it. I stayed down for about half an hour and learned to walk. You have to lean over till your head is about 2 feet from the ground and shove yourself ahead with your toes. When I came to the top, I had a terrific headache that lasted me for about 3 days.
However, Bickford's second dive was magic. He wrote home that the bottom of the ocean was indescribable, the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. He painted a picture of standing in a little gully that looked like a dry creek bed, with steep rock sides covered with seaweed every color of the rainbow.
The water was clear as crystal, and I could see clearly for about 20 feet. Once in a while, a big swell would go by, and all the seaweed would lie down flat, then turn back and lie down the other way, and blow around like a feather in the breeze. All around were starfish and other fish. You wouldn't believe it. Schools of little fellows about 6 inches long went by and looked in the glass to see if they recognized me. Smaller ones about 1 inch long went by like swarms of bees, thousands of them.
After looking and looking for abalone, Bickford said he was delighted when he finally spotted one in a crevice.
I hung over him and gloated over him for a while, and then shoved the bar under him and snapped him off the rock. As he lay there on the ground belly up, I was as thrilled as the day I shot my first rabbit.
Bickford goes on to say that diving is a tough way to make a living, even for the toughest.
After a couple of weeks of good weather, working every day, the divers all get screwy as a bunch of pet coons.
Bickford is referring to the effects of the bends or decompression sickness, another danger early divers especially faced. In the 1930s, there was little or no knowledge of decompression sickness. Bickford from Iowa's greatest gift to Morro Bay may be the many photographs and film he took documenting the early abalone diving industry. Much of the underwater film you see in this program was recorded in the late 1950s by Bickford when he worked as a diver for the California Fish and Game Department. The divers you see in this video are either Bickford or Fish and Game biologist Keith Cox, taken during an abalone survey of the entire California coast. Many of the early ab industry photos, including those of the Pierce brothers, were taken by Bickford. Another early Morro Bay abalone diver was Frank Brebs, who started working with Bill Pierce when he was a young man in 1933. Brebs eventually built California's biggest abalone harvesting business in Morro Bay. He started with one boat, the Hornet, and by the 1950s, Brebs became a top-producing diver and opened a large ab and fish processing shop and fish market. The growth of the Morro Bay abalone industry uplifted the economy of Morro Bay. starting with the Pierce Brothers Abalone Processing Shop. Eventually, there were up to about 10 family-owned abalone shops in Morro Bay. This abalone fishery kicked off what later became a thriving Morro Bay fishing industry in the 1960s and the 1970s. Around Morro Bay and up and down the coast in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, abalone was on the menu at many seafood restaurants. And fried breaded abalone was a common local family dinner. Mountains of abalone shells grew outside processing shops and all along the coast. Here we see a 1944 Life magazine article about a fresh-caught abalone picnic in Hollywood. In the 1950s and 60s, as the early divers retired, more men decided to become abalone divers, and crewmen and abalone boats increased. It was the best of times for an ab diver, a community of pals and buddies who could all make a lucrative living catching a seemingly endless resource. Laws and regulations governing harvest were few, and life on the ocean was a life of one's own. The per-landing limit allowed making 2 or more landings per day, time permitting, and the Department of Fish and Game enforced no annual limit. For example, in the 1960s, a good abalone diver could bring in an average $150 to $200 a day. That's about $1,200 to $1,600 in today's dollars. The season did close 2 months a year, and weather didn't allow for diving sometimes. Divers were fortunate to work 14 days a month. Another abalone diving business of note in Morro Bay in the 1950s was a group of fishermen known as the Black Fleet. Owner and processor Barney Clancy generally had about 5 boats. He bought paint at the war surplus shop and painted his boats black with red trim. Each boat harvested about 200 dozen abalone a week. Local abalone and fishing industry advocate and historian Steve Rebuck's father was a diver in the Black Fleet. By the 1960s, Rebuck estimates there were up to 300 abalone divers locally and about 100 boats operating in Morro Bay and Port San Luis. Many women also earned a living in the Morro Bay abalone industry. These hard-working women included Edie Pierce, one of the pioneering Pierce family. Edie was a fixture on the waterfront for decades. Edie was one of the many abalone processors who moved around to various ab plants during the same day. Edie trimmed abalone with a curved knife that she sharpened using a jade stone. The abalone fishery was gradually changing in the second half of the 1900s. In the 1960s, the boat crew got smaller, a diver and an operator tender. Diving gear became more modern. Also, in the late 1960s, a radical new style of dive boat was designed. The Radden was built specifically for abalone diving by Ron Radden Sr. of Morro Bay. The Radden family had moved to Morro Bay in the mid-1960s. Radden became a successful ab diver. So successful, he earned the nickname Superman. With help from his sons, Radden created a dive boat that was faster, more efficient, and more seaworthy in bad weather. By the early 1970s, most divers either had or planned to have a Radden boat. Radden's son, Don Radden, started his own Radden boat building operation in 1996 in Santa Barbara. By the early 1960s, abalone beds began to thin out. By the mid-1970s, abalone landings declined sharply. The last commercial abalone landing in Morro Bay was reported around 1980 because, according to State Fish and Game, the Morro Bay area abalone population was serially depleted. By the 1980s, the abalone fishery was in catastrophic collapse. Some of the divers transitioned to more traditional fishery catches.
When your mom makes tuna fish sandwiches, that's what it is.
But in an interesting twist, a part of Morro Bay ab divers' history that's not so well known, local divers played a big role in the very last chapter of the California abalone fishery story. After the Morro Bay ab fishery died out, many Morro Bay divers went south to Santa Barbara and kept diving. They roamed, charter members of a wider, single, friendly brotherhood of divers. They brought their experience and skill set, and, along with local divers, helped turn Santa Barbara into the last major ab landing and processing hub in the state. The Channel Islands increasingly became the last main source of commercial abalone in California. In another twist, much of the abalone landed in Santa Barbara was processed at the Pierce Brothers Fisheries Plant on Stearns Wharf by the same Pierce brothers who started diving in Morro Bay. In 1975, the Pierce Brothers plant processed 55% of the entire commercial abalone harvest in California. Also, to stay in business, many Morro Bay divers joined the fledgling sea urchin fishery in addition to abalone diving, or just switched totally to sea urchins. They harvested sea urchins around the Channel Islands, and they also went north to dive for sea urchins in the Point Arena area. This photo shows 18 boats diving for sea urchins at Arena Cove. The majority are Radden boats, and many of those divers are from Morro Bay. In In the 1980s and 90s, despite the success of the remaining local divers, among the last in the state, the end of the Morro Bay abalone fishery story was near. This Department of Fish and Game graph of yearly commercial landings from 1916 to 2001 clearly shows the good harvest from 1950 to 1968, followed by a rapid decline. Surprisingly, in a final, somehow fitting twist, the Morro Bay abalone story came full circle. The Pierce brothers founded the Morro Bay abalone fishery, and they opened the town's first processing shop. Eddie Pierce, the son of the youngest of the original Pierce brothers, was one of the last local divers, and he opened the last Morro Bay processing plant.
Doing his thing on the mallet. Got a little country western music.
Eddie's father was legendary diver Skinner Pierce. Skinner Pierce was a diver until 1966, when he almost died from the bend.
I found out through the years, when I got the opportunity, what he was loving about it. It was something new every day, So as a young boy, watching him grow up, I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to do the same thing.
In 1983, a huge landslide shut down Highway 1 in Big Sur. Skinner was killed when his skip loader was swept from the road and buried by a massive mudslide. His body rests today just a few miles from where his oldest brother Bill died in a tragic diving accident about 40 years earlier. When Skinner died, his son Eddie Pierce was 26 years old. Eddie's dream of being an abalone diver finally came true in the late 1980s.
I was out of work at the time, and I was down shooting pool at Happy Jack's, Morro Bay, and in comes Mike Radden, and he had his sweatpants on, and Mike said, it was like I hadn't seen him in a long time, but he came right over there and was talking to me. I was going, God, I know this guy as one of the new modern day heroes, but besides him and Kenny Carnahan,
Yeah.
we're the only real abalone divers left, or the new generation of them. And what are you doing, Mike? He says, I just come in from a trip, but I lost my line tender. He says, you want to go? He says, you want to go to work for me? And I couldn't believe it. I says, you got to be joking. I'm thinking that he's asking me, and I go, he says, this is perfect for you. And I said, don't even ask again. When do we start? It only took a few months, and Mike says, you're going to be a diver. And I'm thinking, can this dream really be coming true? And it did.
Pierce eventually got an abalone permit. Cost $30,000. In the late 1980s, Pierce and Mike Radden also opened the last Pierce Brothers processing shop. This little-known mobile shop was set up at Pierce's mother's small ranch on the outskirts of Morro Bay. Radden soon sold his share to entrepreneur Tom Weiss. The plant was the last in the state to sell fresh, frozen, wild California abalone steaks. Eddie's sister, Dee Dee Pierce, who started trimming in 1973, was their master abalone up-trimmer. Longtime master abalone pounder, Henry Brabs, was the Pierce shop pounder.
That mallet is what? It's made out of ironwood, and it's 30 years old, 35? Yeah. And this is the way abalone are pounded when they're done correctly.
Brab's son, Larry, who now treasures that mallet, says his father was called Popeye because a pounder's right arm became unnaturally larger than their left. The shop sold every part of the abalone. Frozen abalone went to Hong Kong and Japan.
And we were selling all across the country to Chicago, to Vegas, north to the fancy restaurants in Carmel.
Ab trimmings went to the lobster fishermen, and the valuable shells were used on everything from the inlays on Gibson guitar necks to Levi shirt buttons. In the sunset of the commercial ab fishery, in the 1990s, the State Fish and Game Department made laws to protect the slow-growing abalone population. By 1997, the last legal red abalone was plucked from the Central Coast. That's when Fish and Game banned all commercial and sport abalone harvesting south of the mouth of the San Francisco Bay. Ironically, as the book closed on the Monterey Bay abalone fishery story, the Pierce Processing Shop's best year ever was its last. And Eddie Pierce, one of the last commercial abalone divers in the state?
It basically broke my heart when they told me that I couldn't be a diver no more. But what I do have is I had that window, when the sun shined, and it gave me the opportunity to do what I felt like I was born to do.
In 2017, any abalone diving in the entire state was banned. Today, debate continues about why the abalone vanished. Fish and Game says that on the Central Coast, abalone declined due to fishing pressure from humans and the expanding sea otter population. Below Point Conception, blame is mostly shared by poachers, legal divers, and withering foot syndrome, a bacteria more common in warm waters. Some fishermen say the fishery was killed by poor government management of the abalone resource. As of today, due to declining population, no commercial or sport abalone diving is allowed anywhere in California. Today, abalone is an expensive delicacy on fine dining menus. Morro Bay's once thriving fishing industry started with abalone. The family names of divers who helped Morro Bay's working waterfront prosper live on in their descendants. Many still live in Morro Bay, once the abalone capital of the world.